French Emmental style cheeses are wonderful for cooking, but also for snacking. Fol Epi, which is a baby Swiss, is an example of a really fine Emmental French cheese. It's very subtle in flavor, not nearly as harsh as its counterpart like an Emmentaler, a Swiss. It's a beautiful cheese, small little holes all the way through, gives it a nice creamy flavor, but again, it's a baby Swiss, so it ripens much faster, which gives it that sweetness to it. It's not as harsh or bold, as intense as you would find in most, and Fol Epi means wild wheat stalk, and you see the reminiscence of the wheat stalk etched into its rind, gives it a beautiful look. Also, in the flavor profile, you do notice a little bit of wheat flavor to it. Very subtle though, the primary flavor profile, just like an Emmental or a Swiss, traditional Emmental, is that fruity little bit of nuttiness to it. So very mild cheese, nice way to start off a cheese board. Another great pairing with this is something that isn't going to be too overpowering. And we look at a nice Petite Syrah. This is David Bruce, and this Petite Syrah has a lot of fruit to it, a little bit of plum and intensity to the flavor profile, but not a lot of tannins. You don't want a lot of tannins, something that's going to really creep up and take a bite out of this. This is very subtle and fruity with a little bit of nuttiness to it. There's, of course, a buttery flavor, and we don't want to mask that because it's subtle on an Emmental, not big and bold. We're not trying to kill it here. We're trying to be able to make a nice balance to the flavor profiles, and this wine does a great job on it. If you're looking for something like a Chardonnay, a nice white wine, the Louis Jadot Macon Village works very well. It's not oaky and buttery. You get into that oaky buttery and it's going to overpower this. You could certainly use oaky buttery in a nice Emmentaler, especially if it's been cave aged, but this isn't. This is light, very fruity and mild, and so this one offers a really good fruitiness, a little bit of citrus that kind of cuts through the buttery flavor and really gives it a nice pairing, so you pick up the subtlety flavors without overpowering. You want something a little milder and red, Louis Jadot does a Beaujolais Village, a nice Gamay, and this flavor of this really gives a nice subtleness to the fruit. It's not overpowering. It has a little bit of tartness that works well with the tanginess that you get from here. That tanginess comes from what? A little bit of the nuttiness. And that's very typical. You don't lose it in a baby Swiss, so it's not like it completely disappears. It's got a nice little balance to it. And again, this does not overpower it. So it gives you a nice little pairing between the wine and the cheeses. Also, we can look at a nice pairing with beer. Looking at the Fol Epi being a baby Swiss, it's a fine Emmental style cheese, so we don't want this to be, we don't think that this is a big, bold Emmentaler. It's not. It's a fine, mild version. And again, being a baby Swiss makes it a little milder in itself. Fol Epi means wild wheat stalk, which is reminiscent of the beautiful wheat rind stalks here all throughout the rind. What a beautiful piece of cheese. And again, very mild, subtle, has a nice fruitiness, little bit of buttery flavors. So what I have is a Blue Moon, which is a Hefeweizen style or wheat beer, and this wheat beer has got a nice mildness to it. A little bit of sweetness in the beer, not overpowering, and a light amount of carbonation. Again, the fruitiness of this works very well. A little bit of the wheat rind in the flavor profile, so they blend very well. Gives you a nice marriage between the two. One doesn't overpower the other. They kind of complement each other all the way through. You look for something a little bit more intense, but you don't want to get really wacky kooky out there. That would be the Newcastle Brown. The Newcastle Brown is kind of malty, a little bit of maltiness to it, but the maltiness, the buttery, the fruit, all pairs very well. Think about having how subtle the nut flavor is this. And again, not like an Emmentaler, it's a strong bitter nut. This has got a little bit of a sweet nut with the maltiness of this goes very well. Slight carbonation, cleans the palate, makes every single bite from this cheese fresh and new. So that's great, simple, easy, and fun pairings with the beers and a wonderful French Emmental style cheese, Fol Epi.